Sacco and Vanzetti by Michael Harris and Michael Manley. Braintree, Massachusetts, April 15th, 1920. Two men are carrying a box filled with a shoe factory's payroll from the bank. One is a security guard named Alessandro Bertorelli, and the other a paymaster named Frederick Parmenter. While Bertorelli and Parmenter were walking, a group of armed men approached them, and before Alessandro can pull his gun from his holster, he is shot 4 times in the chest. The wounds were fatal for Alessandro Bertorelli. Parmenter, already having been shot once in the chest, attempts to flee. He is then shot in the back as he runs. Both men are pronounced dead at the scene. The robbers then take the money and drive away. Their stolen vehicle is found later with 12-gauge shotgun shells on the ground nearby. With no apparent leads, police immediately focused on a group of local Italian anarchists. 2 members of this group were Niccolo Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti. Despite having no previous criminal records, Sacco and Vanzetti were known to be members of this group by authorities. When apprehended by police, the 2 denied having any firearms, but both were in possession of loaded pistols. Sacco was also in possession of an Italian passport, anarchist literature, and bullets with the same type of cases that were found at the scene of the robbery and double homicide. Even though there was little evidence against Sacco and Vanzetti, the 2 men were indicted for the murders of Bertorelli and Parmenter. Following the indictment of Sacco and Vanzetti, arc-anarchists around the world began to retaliate violently. One example of violence was when a bomb-laden horse-drawn carriage exploded on Wall Street, leaving 38 dead and 134 injured. Regardless of the acts of violence, the trial began. The trial took place in Dedham, Massachusetts, where Sacco and Vanzetti were tried for the robbery and murders that occurred in Braintree. The case was brought before Judge Webster Thayer of the Massachusetts Superior Court. The prosecution relied on the evidence that Sacco was absent from work the day of the murder, that the men were seen in the neighborhood of the robbery and murder on the morning it occurred, and the fact that the getaway vehicle was also in that neighborhood, and that the witness testified that Sacco aimed a gun at him as Sacco drove away in the getaway car. Much of the physical evidence was also examined and analyzed, but there is no definitive evidence offered by the experts that implicated or cleared the 2 men. After only 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found both men guilty on the murders of Bertorelli and Parmenter. This verdict caused an uproar all over the country. Despite famous intellectuals and socialists like Albert Einstein, H.G. Wells, Dorothy Parker, and Edna St. Vincent Millay advocating a retrial, all attempts for a retrial were denied. Then, on November 18, 1925, a man named Celestino Madridos, who was already serving a jail sentence for murder, confessed that he had participated in the murders of Parmenter and Bertorelli. Though the state Superior Court refused to reopen the case or give a retrial. There was no retrial because at that time only the judge from the trial had the power to grant a retrial. Shortly after this, Sacco and Vanzetti were sentenced to death on April 9, 1927. Though Sacco and Vanzetti maintained their innocence, they were executed on August 15, 1927 by electric chair. After Sacco and Vanzetti were put to death, protests and violent demonstrations broke out in all major cities around the world. London, Paris, Geneva, and Tokyo were the most notable examples of violent protests. Then, in 1997, Massachusetts Governor Michael Dukakis issued a proclamation that Sacco and Vanzetti had been unfairly tried and convicted, and that any disgrace should be forever removed from their names, but it did not proclaim them innocent. It will never be known who really killed Parmenter and Bertorelli, but what is known is that Sacco and Vanzetti were not given a fair trial, nor was the case fully investigated. So it will never be known if Sacco and Vanzetti were really involved with the murders of Parmenter and Bertorelli, but this case is one of the most controversial murder trials that have ever taken place in United States history. So, Sacco and Vanzetti, Guilty or innocent?